Have you ever met someone who seems to catch everything? The shift in your tone, the pause before you answer, the tiny thing you didn't even say? At first, it feels like a gift. But there's a hidden cost to noticing too much, one that almost nobody talks about, and it goes far deeper than just being observant. Being highly perceptive isn't really about intelligence. It's about a nervous system that never fully learned it was safe to relax. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, a constant, low-level scanning of the environment for anything that might signal danger, even when there's no danger at all. This usually starts in childhood, in a home where moods could shift without warning. A child in that environment doesn't get to be a child. Instead, they become an expert reader of faces, footsteps, and silences, because knowing what was coming next felt like the only form of control they had. So they got good at noticing. The tightening of a jaw, the extra second before a reply, the tone that was almost normal, but not quite. Not because they wanted to, but because their safety used to depend on it. Which brings us to something most people never realize. Noticing everything doesn't mean understanding everything correctly. A hypervigilant mind doesn't just observe, it predicts, and it predicts based on old danger, not present reality. So a partner's quiet mood becomes evidence of anger. A slow text reply becomes evidence of rejection. The noticing is real. The story attached to it is often not. This is where it gets painful, because being this perceptive rarely feels like a skill from the inside. It feels exhausting. Constantly reading a room means constantly bracing for impact, even in rooms that are completely safe. Rest becomes difficult, because rest requires believing nothing bad is about to happen, and that belief was never allowed to form. Here's the part almost nobody warns you about. People who notice too much often become incredible at managing everyone else's emotions and terrible at naming their own. They can tell you exactly how you're feeling before you've said a word, but ask them how they feel, and they'll pause, unsure because their attention was always pointed outward, never inward. Over time, this creates a strange kind of loneliness. They're deeply attuned to others, yet quietly unknown themselves. People trust them instantly, unload on them constantly, and rarely think to ask what they're carrying because they seem so composed, so aware, so in control. And here's the sting. Sometimes that perceptiveness gets weaponized, even by the person themselves. They use it to preemptively manage others, to smooth things over before conflict starts, to shape-shift into whatever version of themselves keeps the peace. Not out of dishonesty, but because at some point, staying safe meant staying one step ahead of everyone's emotions, including their own. But before you see this as purely a wound, there's something important to understand. This same trait, when it's no longer running on fear, becomes something remarkable. Deep empathy, fast pattern recognition, an ability to sense what someone needs before they can articulate it. The nervous system that once scanned for danger can be retrained to simply scan for connection instead. The shift starts with a strange, uncomfortable question. What would it feel like to notice something and not immediately act on it? To see the tension in a room and let it exist without fixing it? That pause, letting a moment be uncomfortable without rushing to manage it, is often the first sign that the nervous system is finally learning it's allowed to rest. If any of this sounded familiar in someone you know, or in the quiet, watchful part of yourself, that recognition is not a diagnosis. It's information. And people who notice everything else are usually more than capable of learning to notice themselves too. But keep this in mind. Just as being overly perceptive is rooted in how the brain is wired, there are also certain behaviors that reveal a mind isn't necessarily as complex or as intelligent as everyone assumes. In fact, just as understanding people who notice too much matters, recognizing the signs that instantly give away low intelligence is just as essential for protecting yourself. If you want to know how to spot someone's real intelligence in the very first encounter and avoid being fooled by their surface behavior, make sure to watch the video on your screen right now. See you there.